The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Buried beneath the headlines about second and third wave measures implemented by the Ontario government, legislation on other matters made its way through the House. Tonight we're examining what happened at Queen's Park in this last session beyond COVID-19, from election spending rules to a controversial new highway. Then we'll hear about the science of how wearing masks is altering our ability to read faces. It's Monday, June 7th, and that's next on The Agenda. Certainly the lion's share of what the Ontario government faced this year revolved around COVID-19. But as the legislature rose last week for its summer recess, what about all the other matters attended to at Queen's Park this session? With us on all of that, and all of them in the provincial capital, we welcome, in the downtown core, Carl Baldauf, Vice President at the Macmillan Vantage Policy Group and a former Chief of Staff to the President of the Treasury Board of Cabinet. In the Dufferin Grove area, Chris Ball, Principal at Earnscliffe Strategy Group and a former Director of Communications for the Ontario NDP. And in Midtown, Sabrina Nanji, reporter for the Queen's Park Observer. And it's great to welcome all three of you to our program tonight. Let's, as I suggested in the intro, keep our discussion focused on non-COVID stuff. And so, Carl, get us started here. In the broadest terms, how much was accomplished, would you say, in this past legislative session?
Well, I mean, the key piece of any legislative session in the spring is the budget. And I think by all accounts, the budget did land well, but everything was overshadowed by COVID, and there's no getting around that. Look, this has been a challenging time for Ontario. It's been a challenging time for any government to be able to try to move its people through this time. But the government did get some significant traction on some key issues. Look no further than the federal government coming to the table over their federal infrastructure plan, the provincial infrastructure vision for the GTA, significant investments in broadband infrastructure, legislation around human trafficking. We know Ontario has had some historic challenges with this issue. So a variety of things that if you took COVID away, the government could say, here's some real meaningful change, some real movement, but you can't take COVID away. And I think as Ontarians, we've seen that every decision that government makes around COVID, I mean, we feel it so deeply, they're like tremors. It's been something that's completely taken everything else off the table. But all in all, there is some key success that this provincial government can point to. And I think, the folks that are there are satisfied that we've been able to move through this period with some success to point to, other than COVID. If we're going to talk about COVID, I think there's been a lot of challenges working with the feds on some issues. There's been some challenges in terms of
let's leave COVID for now. We'll leave COVID on the side for now. I just want to stick. Okay, key successes, Chris, is how Carl has described some of what has transpired at Queen's Park over the past session. How would you characterize it?
I think it really depends on who you are in the province and kind of where you sit. So if you're a senior sitting in long-term care home ahead of a long hot summer, maybe not such a great session for you because you still don't have AC in your room. If you're a parent or a child wondering what's happening with getting back to school, not a great session because we're now adjourned and we don't know what's going to be happening in September. Even if you were just somebody looking for a vaccine appointment, I know that you said we don't want to be talking about COVID, but it is one of the major things that did happen during the session. If you're looking for a vaccine appointment in this province, probably not a great session for you because we had a not great booking system that basically we had to rely on Twitter volunteers to help us get vaccinated. I think the budget, I do agree with Carl on the fact that the budget was a bit of a success for the government and that it actually didn't cause too much drama, which I think is actually a bit of a win for this government, given some of the drama that we've seen this session. But it really does depend on where you're sitting. Again, if you're a developer looking to pave over a wetland, you've had a great session. I'm sure we'll get into some of that later. So where you sit really defines on how successful this session was or wasn't.
Well, I know it's because COVID has been such a huge part of our life, Sabrina, for the last 15 months, it's difficult to have a discussion where COVID doesn't come into it. But at least off the top here, I really want to focus on what this government may or may not have achieved unrelated to COVID-19, where they can go to the public, obviously a year from now, and say, here's what we did.
Yeah, I think overall the vibe from this last session was that, especially compared to the Dean French era, there's more organic debate. So we're seeing, relatively speaking, less talking points and certainly less clapping and standing ovations. But in terms of what's on the agenda, the budget was already mentioned. It's other than that, it's been kind of light, and I'm hungry for some legacy policy pieces from the Ford government. I know that COVID has rightfully delayed a lot of their big projects, but in terms of what's left, any electioneering goodies that we might see, I think that'll be saved for the next budget next year. So it was relatively light on the legislative side of things.
Well, Sabrina, let me do a follow-up with you on that. I mean, they did unveil, and admittedly, this was early in the term, so it's been long enough ago in the past that people may have forgotten about it. But they did unveil a $28.5 billion urban transit improvement plan for the city of Toronto. I mean, that doesn't come along every day, right?
Yeah, that's a major piece, huge, ambitious project. Now we're seeing, some more buy-in from the federal government, which is what the province was pushing for. I think that's a major one. We're now also seeing the transition to Ontario Health, the super agency, that's starting to pick up again. I think that we're going to see more of that and more highlighting of that as we lead up to 2022.
Carl, one of the expressions you hear when discussing the Ford government is that they are, quote unquote, holding their gunpowder for now. What exactly does that mean?
So if we think back to this budget that came out, there was a lot that was based with the fact that we are still moving through this emergency. And so, there had been some discussion whether or not you include more in the budget around what will a recovery look like. And, the finance minister even alluded to the fact that we are going to have a growth plan come out in the second half of 2021. And I would imagine that that will focus on what is it and what foundations will the province put in place to get productivity really moving in this province. We know we've been stuck over the last few decades at a relatively low productivity rate, a lot of it contingent on immigration and on residential housing. We need to do better. And I think it's an exciting opportunity for a Conservative government to bring forward a kind of pro-economic development vision for itself, something to take into the next election. The broadband investment that they made in the budget, for example, the level of investment that they announced is going to allow us to revolutionize the way in which Ontarians operate online in every corner of the province. And there really hasn't been in earnest the level of promotion for that because we just haven't been able to focus on non-COVID related things. So it's coming. It is challenging for a government that is conservative in nature to oversee the largest expansion of the state in history, but it was necessary at the time. At this moment. And as we move forward with a vision for recovery, a Conservative government is very well situated to demonstrate its commitment to economic development. I think we're going to see that reveal itself in the coming months.
Well, Chris, let me get you to follow up on your first answer, which was, I'll pick out just one part of it. You said if you're a developer and you want to pave over wetlands in order to get richer, this has been a great time for you. You weren't specific about what you meant there, but why don't you put a little flesh on that bone?
Sure. It's the the ministerial zoning orders that the government has been leaning in on quite a bit over the last little while, which, funnily enough, was actually kind of slipped in Bill 257, which was the bill that Carl was talking about that actually helps expand broadband access to rural communities. And so this is a legislative tool that allows the municipal affairs minister to overrule local planning decisions. Municipalities can write and say, hey, we want this project. And so it kind of trumps any sort of environmental assessment and any other sort of hoops developers would usually have to jump through. And so the government has been under close scrutiny for their use of these MZOs as a means of helping out, at least the opposition has said that this is a means that they're helping out their rich and connected developer friends. There's a recent analysis, I think back in March, showing that a number of these MZOs are actually going to one developer who was quite a big donor to the 2018 Ford campaign. So, we're seeing a bit of some of these things being slipped in under the cover while people are maybe paying attention, and they are having some impacts on both the narrative for this government around who are they really sort of standing up for, but also with regards to the environmental and other impacts of some of these decisions.
Sabrina, maybe I can get you to follow up on that expression that Chris just used, that quote unquote, under the cover of COVID-19, other things have been slipped in through the back door. Is that in your view, a legitimate criticism of this government?
Well, certainly that's, the common refrain from the opposition parties is that the Ford government in particular is notorious for slipping things into bills, either under the guise of it's pandemic related or, it's things that are just packed into omnibus legislation. So this happened even before the pandemic. One example was the skilled trades legislation from this particular session, which is supposed to, streamline the process for apprenticeships, that sort of thing. But it left a lot to regulation. For instance, the minister of the day would decide, have more power over what's a compulsory trade and therefore regulated. The opposition was saying, it's not good enough to just say, just trust us. The minister of the day getting all these powers. It's sort of a matter of reading the fine print. And, like as a reporter, I think when things are left up to regulation or there's a big package in one bill, the other bill I'm thinking of is the red tape legislation from Pramit Sarkaria this session that did a lot of things. It changed the way social assistance is delivered. It also severed the Northern Ontario School of Medicine from Laurentian University. Things like that sort of send my spidey senses tingling, at least, to go parse the regulations, keep tabs on what the government's doing. And it might not, be something sinister in every case, but it certainly makes our job as reporters, to figure out what the government's doing and shine a light on that a little trickier, I should say.
Well, Carl, you know that expression, just move along, folks, nothing to see here, move along, nothing to see here. That's been the accusation against this government. Is it a legitimate accusation?
Look, I have been in opposition. I worked for Tim Hudak when we were in opposition. Opposition is hard. It's challenging because you are trying to throw things against the wall all day and see what sticks. The opposition has been on about this ministerial zoning order issue. This is a tool that is being used. It has been used by previous governments, is being used by this government to allow development to proceed when there is an important public interest to do so. Chris referenced this line of attack from March. There was one instance where all 6 of the cases that Andrea Horwath was referencing, each MZO had been requested by the municipality, and in one instance by the city of Hamilton, to build affordable housing spaces in her own riding. So this is just another tool that's being used to deliver on important investments and to deliver on important community building opportunities. Another line of attack from the opposition demonstrated that they don't clearly understand how accounting works. They tried to go for many months talking about how the provincial government was misrepresenting COVID funding, saying that they had spent money or had allocated money for COVID that wasn't being used for that. And we know at the end of the day, what in fact was happening is on day 1 of a fiscal year or in quarter 1 of a fiscal year, you don't spend all your money in that area for the entire year. By the end of the last fiscal year, all the money had been spent as had been committed to hospitals, to healthcare, to fighting COVID. And so, it's an age-old attack from opposition to say that there's something that's being hidden. It's often, it's an easy tool to use. It's not always effective. And in many instances, the provincial government has been able to demonstrate a firm commitment to delivering on important public policies that the opposition clearly didn't understand. So all this to say, we'll see what the coming months bring. But yeah, it's a very familiar line of attack from opposition parties.
Okay, Sabrina, let me get you back in here because, of course, one of your jobs as a member of the press gallery at Queen's Park is to not just report on what's going on down there, but in some respects play that role that the Constitution provides, holding governments to account and so on. And, for those who don't follow it all that carefully, I presume that's been harder to do over the past year and change because, in fact, when the Premier holds news conferences, reporters are not allowed in the room. The questions are coming in over the phone. It's a very controlled and staged managed bit of choreography. And I wonder if you could tell us, how much more difficult is it for you and reporters to hold the government to account and to find things out when scrums are gone, typical news conferences are gone, the way that things have been done for the last 100 years are gone?
Yeah, it's a lot more difficult for sure. That organic back and forth that we usually have in a scrum, where even reporters can play off each other and follow up. That's how we get the truth out. That whole dynamic has completely changed. The premiers press conferences, they're getting less frequent. They used to be almost daily, and now we're lucky if we get him, once a week. Those press conferences themselves are very tightly controlled by the premier's office. And I do think it is getting a little better now. We have the Press Gallery on Ontario has been able to bring back post question period scrums. They're not, I don't think we'll ever get back to, the scene where there's a minister standing at a mic and there's a bunch of reporters, with recorders in their face. I don't know if we'll get back to that, but the way it's working right now is that, reporters will request a minister that they want to talk to. It's usually the health minister, the education minister, something to speak to the news of the day. But that's happening in the media studio. So we still have the teleconference line going, one question, one follow-up, but we get to actually ask distance masked questions in person. And I think that has really changed a lot for more organic answers and for getting the truth out. But even running into folks at Queen's Park, a lot of us are working from home these days. Sometimes you'll see a minister or an MPP in the hallway and you'll be able to, get a tip or a good quote from them. That is completely gone. And I'm really looking forward to it coming back.
I would echo that last one in particular. It's amazing how much you can find out just buttonholing an MPP or a cabinet minister around a corner after question period is over. And those opportunities to learn things have been completely gone as a result of COVID-19. Having said that, I do want to get into, because we're now at T-minus 1 year and counting until the next provincial election, 2nd of June, 2022. And the election laws are different now in the province of Ontario. For example, the government has limited how much money third-party advertisers can spend a year before an election, as opposed to 6 months before an election. And the government says there is collusion between third parties and political parties, so they wanted to get down on that. They also doubled the amount individuals can donate to a party, candidate, or constituency association from $1,650 now to $3,000, so you can donate more. There's a bunch of other things as well, but let's just start with this. Let's start with this much. Carl, in your view, how meaningful are these changes?
I mean, they're important. They've also doubled the number of advanced voting days. They've empowered the chief electoral officer. So a lot of really important changes to the election law. The changes that you referenced around the third parties, I mean, it's going from $600,000 that they could spend in 6 months to $637,000 over the course of 12 months previous election. So, I think we have to question how much power and influence should third parties have in an election campaign? And we know that there are third parties across the political spectrum. So I think it's just ensuring that there is some controls put in place. Chris references Ford's friends. Andrea Horwath has her own friends. This is ensuring that all those friends of the political party leaders have a little bit more control in terms of how they can effectively try to turn an election in the months leading up to a vote. And so, you reference the changes to the third party laws, as I say, like important changes around advanced voting, things that will enhance democracy, enhance people being engaged in the process. I think it was a good change.
Chris, do you see these things enhancing democracy in Ontario?
I kind of read the third party changes a bit differently. So yes, there's $600,000 over a year versus $600,000 over 6 months. Now, the way things work these days when it comes to targeting and digital advertising is a lot cheaper than if you're trying to do a big, huge radio and TV campaign. So now having a full year to be able to influence the dialogue and to frame a message, just, kind of like what we're seeing from the government itself with their pivot to their fight with the government on the border. So now third parties have a full year to target, micro-target, find those voters that are going to be most susceptible to the government's message, and be able to advertise to them quite directly. So, groups like Ontario Proud and others. The per vote subsidy change was also interesting, as it actually disadvantages the third party, which is now the Liberal Party. funny anecdote that some of my liberal friends, when they heard of the changes, were actually excited by them because it actually recognized the fact that the government may actually see them as some form of a threat this election. So disadvantaging them a little bit from the fundraising might actually be a bit of an advantage for the government. So, anytime that you're changing the rules on how people are elected or how, other groups can exercise their right to free speech is incredibly important to how not only the pre-campaign, but during the campaign period rolls out.
Sabrina, I wonder whether we should have renamed this bill the anti-working families bill, because in essence, you talked about spidey senses. My spidey senses tell me that the Working Families Coalition was so effective at making and broadcasting anti-Tory ads over the last several election campaigns that the government felt it needed to do something to chip away at their effectiveness. Am I reaching here, or what do you think?
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, I definitely can see the arguments. On one side, folks say it's going to muzzle third parties. On the other side, they say that this is going to combat collusion. I think the impact for citizens is that we're going to see less of those ominous, scary ads that we might have seen. I'm thinking of the Tim Hudak era ads that had come out. I think one thing that's sort of flown under the radar with the election bill is that the changes to independents fundraising powers, which is something that COVID skeptic, now independent MPP Randy Hillier has been pushing for, and there's been a lot of talk about that. But essentially, this will allow independents more power to fundraise outside of a campaign period, and we've seen quite a few independents, some folks leaving the PC party. So I think that they'll have an easier time raising money because elections are not cheap.
Carl, I do need to get you on this because Sabrina just referenced ominous, scary ads. And it's true, we're not seeing ominous, scary ads by third parties right now against any of the political parties at Queen's Park. But we are seeing ominous, scary attack ads being taken out by the Ontario PC party against Justin Trudeau, despite the fact that Justin Trudeau has been responsible for directing billions upon billions of dollars to the province of Ontario, never mind for COVID, but also for that public transit infrastructure I talked about earlier, that $28.5 billion public transit plan. Some people could accuse you guys of chutzpah on that one. I mean, it does take an unmitigated amount of gall to take out attack ads against guys who are writing you multi-billion-dollar checks every day of the week, isn't it?
Well, Justin Trudeau is doing that. He's giving those checks out because it is also in his interest to do so. It's in a public interest to do so. But what the provincial PCs are trying to do is to drive a conversation around the fact that we don't know the shape that this virus is going to continue to take in the months ahead. We've seen the variants take hold, and the government jokes about this, but it's true. The virus didn't swim here. Right, it's coming in through our borders. It's coming in through a porous border, and it's taking on new shape, new variants, which are changing and evolving. And so, this is a real subject, and I know a lot of Conservatives feel quite strongly about that. So, thank you, Justin Trudeau, for coming through in terms of the subsidies and some of the federal programs. The province has had to make up for some of the programs the feds didn't fund to the full extent that they should. A lot was made over paid sick leave. The feds put in place a program that just did not work, and the province had to come through at the end of the day, unlike almost any other province in the country. So I think there is some frustration that the province has had to make up for some of the failures of the federal government. I think the issue that the provincial PCs are trying to drive a narrative around is one that has the benefit of being a real risk. And so, I don't think that there's gall involved in it. I think it's an important conversation that we need to be having right now.
Okay, let's move on to one other issue here, and that is the government recently did change the laws around human trafficking in the province of Ontario, and the police now have additional powers meant to help victims of human trafficking. Who do we want? Sabrina, come on in on this. How significant are these changes in your view?
Yeah, I think the debate over this one was pretty heated, but at the end of the day, it passed, with no real opposition from the opposition parties. But I found the debate actually got pretty heated on this one. Critics of the bill have said that this will make sex workers even more vulnerable, and they already are, because it gives them more interaction with police. And when the NDP brought that up in the debate, some MPPs fired back that the NDP might have thought young people who tend to be, victims of human trafficking were legitimate sex workers. It got really intense, but at the end of the day, it did pass. So that was one of the bills that, non-COVID related that got through this session for sure. But it was a mission to get it through.
Chris, are the NDP content with where it ended up?
I mean, the bill passed. I don't think this is multifaceted issue. I don't think everybody can be 100% satisfied with this. I think seeing that some of the burden was lifted from those victimized by human trafficking in the bill, that some of the ability for police to now look at sources outside of just talking to sex workers as sources to combat this stuff is actually a bit of a positive change. Although I think there are still big concerns around re-stigmatizing these workers, putting them more in front of police than maybe we should be. So I don't think it's a perfect solution, but I think there's more to build on.
Okay. While we're talking about the role of the opposition at Queen's Park right now and in this year up to the election, I mean, obviously the first question people have to ask themselves a year from now is, do we want these guys who are in power now back again? And then the second question they ask is, if we don't want them, who do we want instead? And Chris, I'll go to you first on this one, because it's highly unusual in this day and age where politicians seem so disposable. Andrea Horwath's about to lead her party into her fourth general election. That is really quite some record of longevity. But of course, the question that comes along with that is, what can you imagine her saying this time that she hasn't already said in 3 previous elections, so that the electorate will actually take a fourth look at her next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think first we have to start about where the ONDP is right now when it comes to the getting ready for the next election, right? So by every objective measure, they're in the best shape they've been in a long time. Fundraising numbers are good. They recently announced they're training thousands of volunteers that have come to them. That's partially, thanks to Liberal collapse in 2018. They've now got a strong hold in those seats around the waterfront in Toronto that have been very important to them in order to win government. So now, to your point, it's about holding what they got, and now it's about what is the next 23 seats and how do they now cut through to get people to buy in. And I think you're seeing them start to lay some of that track right now around their core focus around COVID. Not only is it timely, but also pointing out some of those issues around whose side is this government really on when the chips were down. I think to your point earlier that people don't usually vote out incumbent governments unless they've actually decided that they don't like them. So they're still in job one phase right now, which is to tell the story about how Doug Ford failed this province, failed education workers, failed parents, failed folks in long-term care. And now the next piece is, what is that forward-looking vision? Now, what you've already seen is they've laid out a couple of platform planks already. So they released their long-term care vision. They've recently released a plan for small business. So they're taking a very targeted approach on some of the core issues that they know are going to resonate with voters now, start to talk about those early and often so they can, repetition is good in this way. So they are probably going to run a very Andrea-focused campaign, and Andrea is actually their best asset. I don't think any leader that sticks around for this long sticks around because they're bad for the party necessarily. So
no, her personal popularity numbers are usually quite good, usually the best of all the leaders on offer. And Sabrina, maybe I'll get you to follow up on that. The thing is, though, objectively speaking, she has raised all the right issues at the right time, as a leader of the opposition would, whether it was long-term care, whether it was, accessibility to hospitals, whether it was the education system reopening or not. I mean, she has hit the right notes at the right time. And yet the NDP, I note, is still, anywhere, depending on which poll you pick, 7 to 10 points behind where they were on election day back in 2018. So again, do we imagine that there's anything that Andrea Horwath's going to be able to say next year that people haven't already heard that would make the people take a fourth look at her?
It's been said that there's no room for an opposition in a pandemic, and I think that is something that applies here in Ontario. The opposition parties have been having a hard time getting their message across. I think that is changing now a little bit as the premier, he's losing cool points. His popularity is sinking, as the third wave took hold. But, according to the polls, as you mentioned, NDP leader Andrea Horwath and her party have really failed to capitalize on the PC's mistakes. And, as well as the Liberals, relative obscurity. Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca doesn't have a seat in the House. He puts out, statements, but reporters are scrumming, typically John Fraser, the Liberal health critic, after question period, like Del Duca is not there. And yet, the Liberals who were decimated in the last election are, sometimes neck and neck with the NDP and the PCs in the polls. And, meanwhile, we have Mike Schreiner, who is always punching above his weight and in the House and, outside of the House. And it really feels at this point like 2022 is anybody's game.
Carl, as a conservative strategist, give us the straight goods on this. Who do you fear more as a rival to the progressive conservatives staying in power after the next election?
Well, I mean, with Del Duca, there's still a lot that's unknown, both about him personally and as well his ability as the leader of the Liberal Party. So there is the unknown factor. And of course, never count the Liberals out. Justin Trudeau went from third to first back in 2015. So, I continue to be concerned about what the Liberals will bring just because of their historic place and having very recently been in government. There are people that are within that party that understand how government works and can understand how to build a coalition for support. Polls have been referenced a few times. There have been 3 polls that have been released over the last few weeks. And in each one, the Tories have at least an 8-point lead above their number 2. In 2 of those polls, it's one party, and in one of the polls, it's another party. So this is a very good foundation from which the Conservatives can build over the course of the next year, their re-election effort. We referenced a few things that they're going to be able to put into the window that are going to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. And Chris, even referencing long-term care, like this is a party that's actually made some remarkably significant investments even in advance of the pandemic. And of course, very clear issues during the pandemic, a lot of challenges within the sector. But in a lot of ways, it's overcompensating for the underinvestment that took place over the last 15 years by the former government. That is something that Ford will point to absolutely in this next year. So even on some challenges where perhaps the NDP thinks this Conservative government is vulnerable, there is success that they can point to. There's been a lot of noise with the pandemic. And when that noise goes down, they're going to point to important new investments. They're going to point to an economic revitalization. It is a very strong foundation from which to launch the re-election effort.
Well, and Chris, I have to put this to you. History is history. It doesn't always predict the future. Sometimes it never predicts the future. But the fact of the matter is, in the province of Ontario, in 154 years, only 3 elected premiers have failed to get re-elected. So the question I presume Ontarians are considering over the next year is, has Doug Ford done enough to make him number 4 on that list? What say you?
I honestly don't think that the jury's out on that yet. I mean, if you look at the polls, and I'm taking my partisan hat off right now. So if we look at just the polls themselves and where the seats are distributed, where the premier needs to win, a lot of those seats are still holding strong. And if you can't really go by sort of the Twitter dialogue and the heat that's coming out of downtown Toronto and other places as a barometer for the electoral fortunes for this government. So I think the jury is still out. I think people are open to that conversation around Ford wasn't there for us. Ford isn't maybe the right guy to take us into the next future post-COVID. I think that Carl is right that once we get to September, it's a whole different conversation. I think people will be, having enjoyed their 1-dose, maybe 2-dose summer and are now looking towards what does the economy look like for me? What does it look like for me getting back to school with my kids? And the government and just Ontarians in general are going to be a lot more forward-looking. So it's really going to be about capturing that momentum going forward. And if they can actually capture that and maybe miss some of those speed bumps that are probably coming around maybe potential inquiries into the handling of the pandemic, further scrutiny on long-term care and the vaccine rollout, then maybe they've got a chance to right themselves. The opposition has the same challenge with regards to being able to get to that forward-looking vision post-COVID, because once I think we get to September and once everybody's hugged their mom, I think they're going to be feeling a lot more future-oriented than they are now.
Well, that's interesting. Sabrina, can I get you on that? Because we've been so obsessed with COVID for so long. I guess the assumption today would be the next election is going to be a referendum on how well this government has handled COVID-19. But again, we're 51 and a half weeks until the next election, so maybe it'll be about something else?
Yeah, I've heard someone say that the electorate has the memory of a goldfish. So I guess we'll see what 1 year from now entails. But I think absolutely, there's going to be so many reports coming, from the Auditor General, the Ombudsman, about the government's handling of this. We're hearing the opposition parties call for public inquiries, that type of thing. I think that certainly if the electorate will not forget, because the opposition parties aren't going to let them forget, really. I think that's what we're going to hear a lot from them leading up to the election is, the Ford government's handling of COVID, which obviously the opposition parties think could have gone a lot better.
Carl, I'm down to my last minute here. If the next election is in fact a referendum on the Progressive Conservative government's handling of COVID-19, how comfortable would you be if that were the ballot question?
Well, look, our vaccine distribution has been a success. We're slightly ahead in terms of doses administered than BC. We're slightly behind Quebec. So in terms of large provinces, we're doing remarkably well. The government has made the investments that are necessary. They've supplemented some federal programs that did not go the full length. For things like small businesses, they did 2 rounds of $20,000 grants. So massive amounts of investments. And on the whole, I think the province has a good story to tell. That being said, I do not think that this will be a referendum on Doug Ford's handling of the pandemic. I think it will be about what is important to people now in this moment, and this moment will be a year from now when they're looking beyond the pandemic. And so, important stories that they can tell, but at the same time, focused on that growth plan, focused on the massive investments in infrastructure, focused on all those things that are going to make a tangible difference in people's lives. And as I say, it's a great foundation from which to build.
Carl Baldauf, Chris Ball, Sabrina Nanji, good of all three of you to join us on TVO tonight. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Practically overnight, most of us went from never having worn a mask to masking up every time we leave the house or encounter anyone not in our bubble. It's been crucially important for public health, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we like it all that much. And part of why that might be is the effect that it has on our ability to read faces. With us now on his research on that, from Thornhill, Ontario, Erez Freud, cognitive neuroscientist and assistant professor at York University's Center for Vision Research. Erez, it's good to have you on TVO tonight. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Good to have you aboard. Let's just start with something, right back to basics. How important is facial perception to human beings?
So face perception is probably the most important visual abilities that we have as humans. It allows us to interact with other individuals, to identify their gender, their emotion, their identity. We use it all the time, and we are actually sensitive to other faces right when we're born, like right from the beginning of our lives. We know that even infants are already sensitive to this structure of a face, 2 eyes, nose, and a mouth.
Or I should say, I have seen you speak in the past about our brains processing faces. I think the word you use is holistically. What does that mean?
So when we process faces, we integrate the different aspects of the face together. So it's not the case that we process the eye in isolation and then the mouth and the nose. No, we create a holistic representation of the face. We look on the face as a whole. And this is a very unique characteristic of face perception.
Now, of course, we're in a situation and have been for about 15 months where most of us are wearing masks a lot of the time, certainly whenever we leave our homes. How has mask wearing impaired our ability to process faces?
So it's a great question. So obviously, since we began using the mask, we suddenly occlude part of our face. So it's not surprising that our face perception is impaired as the result of mask wearing. But what we found, it's not only that we have this reduction in face perception abilities, it's also the case that we process faces differently. So instead of this holistic perception, which is so vital to successful face processing, we process the faces, the mask faces, in a more local fashion, like an attribute by attribute, a feature by feature, rather than to perceive the face as a whole.
And what's the downside of that?
It basically makes our face perception abilities less successful and less useful. And it might also impact our ability to learn new faces, to memorize new faces, because we have this very efficient method to identify faces, and now we cannot employ this method. So we left to our own devices, in a sense, and we need to try and understand or to decode the face in a different fashion. We're actually following up this study, and what we find is not only that our face perception abilities decreased for mask faces, it is also the case that we are not getting any better. So even 1 year into this, or 1 year and a half into this pandemic, our face perception abilities of mask faces are still decreased in comparison to non-mask faces.
Well, let me ask you about some of the testing that you've been doing, because I gather you have tested hundreds of people from around the world using something called a modified version of the Cambridge Face Memory Test. Just give us a sort of a brief outline of what that is.
Sure. So we use the CFMT, the Cambridge Face Memory Task, which is the most standardized face perception test out there. In this test, participants are asked to identify faces from different orientations, and they need to memorize the faces. And we actually tested more than 1,000 participants over the last year. In our experiment, we also added masks to the experiment, and we can then identify the effect of mask on perceptual abilities. In addition to this,
let me jump in here for a second, Aris, because we have a picture of what you do. So Tony Burke's switching today. Tony, can I ask you to bring that up? Because here's a picture similar to the ones that you showed participants in your test. And obviously, I guess I should explain this for people who are listening on podcast and can't see this. There are 3 circles at the top where you see an entire face. And then there are 3 circles below where you see eyes only, because the bottom of the face from nose to chin is covered by a mask. Now, how much did adding the masks, Aris, hinder a participant's ability to read faces when you were testing this?
So what we found is that when we add the mask, we have a decrease of about 15% in recognition abilities. And again, this reduction in face perception is quite significant. Think about that. 15% of our initial ability to identify individuals is impaired because of the mask.
I'm surprised it's only 15%, and I tell you that because in my own personal experience over the last 15 months, I frequently run into people in the neighborhood or wherever, out for a walk, and I know them, but I don't recognize them when their face is covered from nose to chin. Is it really only 15%? Because it feels a lot more than that to me.
So it's 15% in average. There are people who are more affected by the mask, while others do not show the effect at all. And again, it reflects the fact that we are all different in our ability to perceive faces. There are people who are really good in face perceptions, while others are pretty bad. And I think that the effect of the mask mirrors these kind of sensitivities to face information. So it might be the case, I don't know, but it might be the case that you usually look on the lower part of the face and rely on this part to perceive the face more. And this is the reason that you find it very difficult to identify and recognize people who wear masks.
You know what? That makes a lot of sense, because the other day, I'm going a little off the path here, but the other day I went for my second vaccine, and there was somebody else there who I knew, except I didn't know them because they were wearing their mask. As soon as they spoke, I recognized the voice, but I didn't recognize their face from the mask covering.
Yeah, so
I'm bad, eh?
So we know that person recognition relies not only on faces, right? We have biological motion, the way that we move. We have voice. And we know that people who suffer from face recognition disabilities, we call those individuals prosopagnosic, or they suffer from face blindness. They actually utilize those external cues, those other cues, to compensate for their inability to identify faces. And I guess that what happened right now is that we all, to some extent, use those other cues to compensate for the mask effect.
That's a big word that I haven't heard before. Prosopagnosic, is that the word?
Yeah, prosopagnosia. Yeah, it refers to the inability to identify faces. There are two types of prosopagnosia. One is called acquired prosopagnosia after a brain injury, a stroke, to specific locations in the visual system, in the visual cortex, in a region which is called the fusiform face region. And the other type of prosopagnosia is developmental or congenital prosopagnosia. Those are individuals who, from birth, exhibit difficulties in recognition of other individuals, to the extent that those individuals cannot identify their family members, themselves, their close friends. Again, they rely on external cues, on, for example, a mustache or a specific type of clothes, and they are very sensitive to changes in those cues. So if, for example, I would do, in my case, it's probably not relevant, but a haircut for me might confuse individuals with prosopagnosia.
Gotcha. Okay, that's fascinating. Now, I gather you also have other studies that show that mask wearing can actually increase feelings of solidarity between some people. Now, how does that work?
So this kind of research, or this line of research, is not from my lab, but there are reports that show that people who look on faces with masks find them to be more attractive, and they even increase the solidarity with those individuals. Obviously, we still don't know what are the causes or what mediate those effects. One option is that the fact that we see other people wear masks, we feel, okay, we are here in this together, we are fighting this pandemic together, and those individuals do the right thing and wear a mask, and therefore we find, or we evaluate them more positively. Again, this is not my line of research, so I wouldn't know. But obviously, masks are here, and they are something, I guess, that we are going to see in the foreseen future. And therefore, we have specific feelings about people who wear masks or people who do not wear masks, obviously.
Well, let me follow up on that by asking a question from sort of the other side of the coin. And it's a bit of a strange question, but well, let me just hit this on the head. There are some people who are objectively less attractive than other people. And I wonder whether mask wearing makes people more attractive because you cannot somehow see the flaws in their face. I don't know. Help me out with this one.
So there is one report that shows this reduction in the attractiveness of faces when they do not wear masks. There are many reasons for this effect. One explanation can be the fact that we find the average face to be more attractive. And if you now hide, right, the lower part of the face, you don't know what there is there. So your brain, to some extent, can complete this missing part and make it an average, which makes the face to be perceived more attractive. Another explanation could be the fact that again, a face which is covered by a mask is perceived as more symmetrical, and we perceive more symmetrical faces to be more attractive. So there are different reasons that can explain the attractiveness of the mask faces.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about kids. Are children better or worse at this than adults?
It's a great question. We conducted one study here with school-age children, and we found out that children are affected from the mask effect, and actually they are more affected from the mask effect than adults to some extent. So the decrease that we found in the kid is around 20%. Now, obviously, here in Ontario, kids are not going to school for the last 2 months. So they experience, I guess, less interaction with people with masks, right? I have 2 kids here that sit at home and learn from their computers. So obviously, they are now exposed to faces with no mask all the time. So I guess that they do not even have the ability to get used to those mask faces.
Okay, well, let me do a follow-up on that. And that is, let's say at some point in the last year and a half, you had a baby, and that baby has spent the first year and a half of his or her life. I mean, presumably the parents aren't masked up, but presumably almost everybody else in that child's life have been wearing masks. Do we have any understanding as to whether there are any long-term consequences of that?
Again, it's a great question. We know that experience is vital to shape face perception abilities. Monkeys, for example, who were raised without seeing faces, did not develop the same brain mechanisms to process faces. However, at the same time, I would say that even infants or babies that were born in the time of the pandemic are still exposed to some faces. I guess that they are exposed to faces over Zoom or in their screen. So I guess that they still get some experience with faces of other individuals. We don't know yet if there are any implications on face perception abilities, but it is important to say that the face perception system, the face processing system, is still flexible, and there is some level of plasticity even later in our childhood.
Does it not stand to reason, though, that if the only faces you have seen as a baby or a child are on a television screen as opposed to in person, that somehow has to have an impact on your ability to read faces as you age?
Of course. So if we limit the experience that babies have with faces, we might limit to some extent their ability to identify other faces. Again, from research that was done, we know that there is a thing which is called the other race effect. We have an advantage in recognizing individuals from our own culture, from our own race, because we are exposed to these individuals more. And if you actually expose babies to individuals from other races, they do not show this effect. So it is the case that experience shapes our face perception abilities. But I still believe that babies still get the sufficient amount of experience with faces to develop a normal face perception abilities even these days. And I hope that this is the case. We don't know yet. We didn't do the research. And one thing to remember, it's now summer. People are walking outside with no masks on. So babies will get even more opportunities to gain this important experience with unmasked faces.
Understood. All right. Well, this next question may not be answerable because, of course, I'm trying to find out whether 5 years or 10 years down the road, what the consequences of all of this might be. And the fact is, you only have research from the last 15 months to draw upon. But having said that, do you have any informed speculation as to whether or not what we've gone through over the past 15 months may have, never mind kids now, adults, are we going to have long-range consequences to that which we've experienced over the last 15 months?
So for this question, I think that I probably can have an answer. So far, we do not find any changes in face perception abilities over the last 15 months. So we are not getting worse with unmasked faces. We are not getting better with masked faces. So it seems as if our face processing system, at least in adulthood, is quite rigid. It's not the case that we can actually train it to become much better or much worse. So there are good news. We're going to be all right in terms of identifying unmasked faces. And the bad news is that it doesn't seem the case that we are going to get better or much better with masked faces.
Does racial background play at all in our ability to perceive people's faces or have difficulty perceiving people's faces?
So as I mentioned before, there is a well-known phenomena which is called the other race effect. So people are better in recognizing people from their culture and their society. But this effect is cultural in nature. So it means that if you grow up in a more diverse society, in a more diverse culture, you are less likely to show this other race effect.
Understood. Okay, Erez, I know you get this question all the time, but I know everybody who's watching this is curious. Your last name is Freud. Are you related to Sigmund Freud?
Yes, but it's pretty far away. So my grandfather was a second cousin of Sigmund Freud.
But you actually are related to him. That's fascinating.
Yes, thanks.
Perhaps not all that unusual that you ended up sort of in the same profession then.
Yes, I have my PhD in psychology after all.
There you go. Okay. Well, it's been great to have you on the agenda tonight. Thanks so much for your help on this.
Thank you for inviting me.
And that is the agenda for Monday, June the 7th, 2021. Tomorrow, we're going to take a look at women in hockey, and we're going to talk to Raptors superfan Nav Bhatia about his induction into the Basketball Hall of Fame. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.